Hello out there and welcome to my channel. My name is Milesy and today I'm going to talk a little bit about frogs. And I don't mean the cute little critters that live in trees and ponds and make cute little noises, but the kind of frogs that make people want to tear their hair out. If you saw this last week, where I was getting pretty far into the Death Star, all things considered, and then had to tear everything out because half of the design was shifted one column to the left in a way that was just not going to be fixable, that's what happened. So I figured instead of just getting angry, I would use this as a learning exercise and actually show you guys my process for how I frog a piece that needs to be frogged just wholesale and not a piece where it's just a couple of colors and I can undo the stitches individually. This wasn't going to happen in this case. It's a pretty big piece using a whole bunch of shades of pretty indistinguishable grays. So what I do is I use a seam ripper, as you can see me going back and forth to here. And with the seam ripper, how I do this is I take off the individual layers of the stitches. So the top layer of my stitches, for instance, goes from the upper right to the lower left. So when I take out that layer of stitches, I move my seam ripper from the lower right to the upper left, always going against the stitch so that I catch it. And one thing that you can't see is that I always have one hand on the other side of the fabric, and that's to make sure that the seam ripper doesn't want to go through the fabric and tear it to pieces, because it absolutely will. You have to be very slow, very patient. This has been sped up about 800%, a little bit more than that. So it took me a long time to do this. It just is sped up so that it's a little bit easier to see. But you want to do that, and then every now and then when it becomes a little bit too difficult to see what I've already done, I take my scissors and just very gently, not quite touching the fabric, but just over top the stitches, just kind of cut everything that's been made loose by the seam ripper, and that makes it a little bit easier for the needle to come through and pull everything out and just make everything a little bit easier. And this is kind of a multiple step process, because once the needle has pulled everything out, I take some masking tape and I roll it over my fingers and use that to pick up all of the fuzz that's been left behind, and I will do this on the front and the back. Another thing that you want to do is don't take your work off of your hoops, your stretcher bars, your scroll frame, whatever you use. Leave it on the fabric, because the tension will help make sure that you're not ruining your fabric by tearing it with your seam ripper or just warping it too much. And this way you'll also have really nice tension to hold with your hand on the back to get that seam ripper really in there underneath the stitches, but not through the fabric. And that is the most important part, is just, it's a lot of patience and a lot of trial and error, really, in getting this to work. But this, I think, took me about 45 minutes. It's been sped up an awful lot, but you guys didn't want to sit here for 45 minutes watching me do this, so it's been sped up quite a bit. And I just wanted to do this to show you guys that frogging it's a slow process, and it is pretty awful. Nobody really likes to do it, especially when you've put this much time into something. But if you do it right, you can absolutely reuse your fabric. It doesn't mean that you have to give up and throw it away, and a lot of people, when they're first starting out, their frogging efforts will kind of ruin the fabric. So you've pulled out all the stitches, and then you look at your fabric and it's kind of torn up in places, or it's been really badly distorted because you've got in there and were just a little bit too rough with the weave. But if you're very patient and are willing to do things in a slow, step-by-step process, in my case using the seam ripper and then the scissors and then the needle to just pull everything out, the needle isn't doing any kind of tearing or cutting, it's just doing what my fingers are too big to do. And then you use the tape to go over and pick up all the bits and then repeat. And this took me several repeats of this entire process to get things going. But I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!